The return that changed everything. The fluorescent lights of the grocery store hummed softly overhead as Michael Thompson pushed his cart down the nearly empty aisles. It was 8:30 on a Tuesday evening, well past the usual rush of families doing their weekly shopping. Michael preferred it this way: quiet, efficient, no crowds to navigate around. As the chief financial officer of Thompson Industries, Michael's days were filled with meetings, spreadsheets, and decisions that affected hundreds of employees. But his evenings were always the same: a lonely drive home to his empty apartment, sometimes stopping at the store for the basics he needed to keep going. Tonight was one of those nights. His cart held the usual items: frozen dinners for one, coffee, the kind of groceries that spoke of a life lived in solitude. At 42, Michael had achieved everything he thought he wanted professionally, but success had come at a cost. Long hours had replaced relationships. Ambition had crowded out connection. That he turned toward the checkout lanes. Something made him pause. At the customer service counter, a young woman stood with her back to him, holding a baby in her arms. Even from behind, Michael could sense her distress in the way her shoulders were set, tense and defensive. The woman had blonde hair that looked like it hadn't seen a proper cut in months, and she wore a gray coat that had seen better winters. In her free hand, she clutched a can of baby formula, the expensive kind that Michael had noticed cost nearly $30 whenever he happened to glance at the baby aisle. "I'm sorry," the woman was saying to the teenage clerk behind the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to return this. I have the receipt." Michael found himself slowing his cart, drawn by something in her tone. It wasn't anger or impatience, it was resignation mixed with something that sounded like defeat. The baby in her arms. Michael could see now it was a little girl, maybe 6 months old, with wispy blonde hair like her mother's. Began to fuss softly. The woman shifted the child gently, whispering soothing words that Michael couldn't quite hear but could feel the tenderness in. "Is there something wrong with the formula?" the young clerk asked, his voice carrying the practiced politeness of someone who dealt with returns all day. "No," the woman replied, her voice even quieter now. "There's nothing wrong with it. I can't afford it right now. My card was declined earlier, and I thought maybe by tonight I'd figure something out. But, She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Michael understood immediately what was happening, and something inside his chest tightened in a way he hadn't felt in years. The woman, who looked to be in her mid-20s, stood a little straighter as she placed the formula can on the counter. "I have the receipt," she repeated. "I paid cash earlier today." Michael watched as the clerk processed the return, the $28.67 being counted out slowly. The woman took the money with careful hands, as if those bills represented more than just cash. They represented dinner, or bus fare, or whatever small necessity would have to take priority over her baby's formula tonight. As she turned to leave, Michael got his first clear look at her face. She was pretty in a tired, worn-down way that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too many hard choices. But what struck him most were her eyes. They held a strength that refused to break, even when everything else seemed to be falling apart. The baby had settled against her shoulder, tiny fist curled against the worn fabric of her mother's coat. The woman kissed the top of the baby's head with such gentle love that Michael felt something shift inside him. Some wall he'd built around his heart developing its first crack without thinking. Michael abandoned his cart and walked quickly toward the customer service counter. "Excuse me," he called softly. The woman turned, her eyes widening with the wariness of someone who'd learned that strangers rarely brought good news. "Yet, I couldn't help but overhear," Michael said, his usual boardroom confidence replaced by something more hesitant, more human. "I'm sorry if this seems forward, but would you let me buy that formula for you?" The woman's face flushed red, and Michael immediately regretted his approach. Too direct, too blunt, the same qualities that served him well in business were all wrong here. "I'm not asking for charity," she said quietly, but without anger. "We're fine." "I know you're not," Michael said gently, "and I can see that you are fine, that you're strong and capable and doing everything right. But sometimes we all need a little help, and I'd like to offer it if you'll let me." The baby chose that moment to let out a soft cry, and the woman's resolve wavered for just a moment. Michael could see the internal battle playing out on her face, pride warring with necessity, independence fighting against her child's needs. "My name is Michael," he said, extending his hand. "Michael Thompson." "Sarah," she replied after a moment's hesitation, shifting the baby to shake his hand. "Sarah Martinez, and this is Emma." "Hello, Emma," Michael said softly to the baby, who had stopped crying and was now studying him with curious blue eyes. "She's beautiful, Sarah." 6 months, Sarah said, and Michael could hear the love and pride in her voice despite everything. She's everything to me." "I can see that," Michael said. "Would you let me help, please? Not as charity, but as one parent looking out for another." Sarah looked at him with surprise. "You have children?" Michael felt that familiar pang of loneliness, but this time it carried something else. Hope, maybe. "No," he admitted, "but I'd like to someday, and when I do, I hope there would be people like you raising them, people who put their children first, no matter what." Something in his honesty seemed to reach her. Sarah looked down at Emma, then back at Michael, and slowly nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll pay you back somehow." "No," Michael said firmly but kindly. "This isn't a loan. This is just someone who has more than he needs, sharing with someone who deserves better than what life has handed her lately." As they walked back through the store together, Michael found himself asking about Emma's milestones, about Sarah's life. He learned that she worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a diner during the day while Emma stayed with a neighbor, another cleaning offices at night. He learned that she was trying to save money for nursing school, that she wanted to build a better life for her daughter. At the checkout, Michael bought not just the formula, but diapers, baby food, and other essentials that Sarah tried to refuse until he explained that his company had a community outreach budget that needed to be used. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Michael made a mental note to create such a program first thing tomorrow morning as they walked to the parking lot. Emma had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, peaceful and content. "Sarah," Michael said as they reached her old sedan, "I know this might sound strange, but would you be interested in a job? My company is looking for someone to help run our new employee wellness program. It's day shift, full benefits, and it pays enough that you wouldn't need 2 jobs anymore." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Michael looked at the sleeping baby, then at Sarah's tired but hopeful face, and realized he'd been asking himself the wrong question all these years. Instead of asking what success could get him, maybe he should have been asking what it could give others, because sometimes the best investment isn't in stocks or bonds, he said quietly. Sometimes it's in people who remind you what really matters. 3 months later, as Michael watched Sarah graduate from her first company training program while Emma babbled happily in the on-site daycare he'd had installed, he realized that the night he'd met them had changed his life more than theirs. He'd thought he was saving them, but really, they had saved him from a life that had everything except the things that mattered most.